Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the first Stuff&Things. I know, sometimes when I say it, it sounds like I'm saying stuffing things. We're not going to have any turkeys or chickens or anything in here. That we're not stuffing anything. Maybe your brain's full of knowledge and stories, but that's about it. Other than that, welcome. Stand by for technical difficulties. What technical difficulties? Please tell me you're joking. All right, it looks like we're up and going. So I have William Paul Young back, aka my dad, and
we decided that gaming wasn't quite up my alley. I couldn't hardly think and game at the same time, especially since I didn't know what I was doing. So this is great. This is so much easier.
Now that's interesting. Huh.
What's the problem? This is why you have episode ones.
Yes. I went to your camera, which is there a blue?
No.
Okay.
Oh, so they can't see me, can they?
No, it's just showing the empty chair, which is
that's
fantastically hilarious.
Well.
Oh my gosh, they found out I was a vampire.
Yes, I don't know why it's doing this. This is supposed to be working. I don't know why it's not working.
That's okay. As long as I can hear my voice.
That's me. Hey!
Am I on?
You're on now.
Oh, it's blue. Yes, so I'm...
Yay! Magical times, guys. Magical times.
Episode 1.
Episode uno of this goodness. Welcome, everybody. Okay. You're going to look at my beautiful face for another couple minutes here. We're going to get through a couple of the little pieces of information. So, this is a new vodcast that I'm doing. I will be doing it every Friday, whether I have a guest or not. So hopefully I can get some guests, or else you're just going to listen to me talk for a while and interact with me, which, who knows, maybe that'll be fun. You never know.
You can ask him questions about his dad. That's what you can do.
So, tonight, we're just going to be talking kind of like we did last time, except there's no video games being played because we want to focus on things. NX750 says, hey, NX750. How are you doing this evening? We are going to do the same thing that we did with the last one, where we have a nonprofit. It is going to be uncaged.org again. And we changed it up a little bit this time. Before, it was during this time that we have that's live, that we're going, whoever donates, 50% of those donations go to the nonprofit. That still is correct. However, I will be posting this video and future videos on YouTube. So within a month of when this airs and when it's posted, if you want to donate to the cause, if you watch the video, say 2 weeks down the road, and you're like, I couldn't watch it live, but I want to watch it now, and you want to donate, you can always come to my page, my channel on Twitch, this channel here, and click the donations button. And when you donate, just put in uncaged.org so that I know that that's what it's for, and 50% of all those for the next month will also go into that. So, go ahead.
For those of you who don't know what uncaged.org is, it is a organization that's being formed with basically 2 prongs in terms of its impact. One is we're trying to deal with aftercare for trafficked victims all around the world. In fact, it'll be eventually, it looks like one of the largest aftercare programs, complete with little modular villages and things after rescue operations that will help people get back on their feet, get through a healing process. And then the second element of it is that we're also wanting to change the hearts of the traffickers themselves. So I have a friend, Denise Ritchie, in New Zealand, and it was because of Denise that New Zealand changed the laws and decided that any Kiwi, any New Zealander, anywhere in the world could be prosecuted for sexual exploitation, sexual trafficking, sexual tourism. And about 15 years ago now, maybe 12, 13 years ago, that legislation in New Zealand affected legislation in the United States. So it's now true that any U.S. citizen or green card alien, which I was for a long time, if you're involved in sexual tourism, trafficking, exploitation of underage children, then you can be federally prosecuted here in the U.S. And if they can prove that you were going to go somewhere to do that, you can be federally prosecuted here. So good steps are happening. But it's like, so how do we change the demand side of the equation so that this is not such a horrendous issue in the world? And that's what uncaged.org is trying to do.
Awesome. That's great. I'm going to have you talk just a little bit more just to make sure your microphone is working properly.
Okay. So I just got back last night from a trip to Missoula, Montana. And I don't know if you remember this, but Missoula is the centerpiece for a movie called, do you remember?
Missoula?
Missoula, Montana. Think fly fishing.
Oh, a river runs through it.
That's it. So it's a true story. River runs through it. And the pastor is the Presbyterian pastor in Missoula. So they have the church is still there. And I went fly fishing one day. I was speaking the other days, but went fly fishing, second time in my life. And I caught 6 fish. I got 3 rainbows. One of them was 20 inches long. It was catch and release. And 2 cutthroats and 1 brown. And so it was great. It was fun. Beautiful. Being out on a river. It's the river that runs through it. You know, it's an interesting thing. That river was so polluted that they couldn't shoot there at first because it had almost died because of the runoff from the mills and the tailings from mining and everything that was happening in Montana. And so when they shot the movie, it's since been cleaned up, but when they shot the movie, they actually shot it at a different river because of the pollution and the one that it wasn't available at the time. So, but great movie.
The stuff you learn, I'm telling you. So let's see here. So that's Uncaged out of the way, and we'll bring it up again. And that's a very incredible organization. And like I said, any donations between now and a month from now that you make through my channel here, Old Man Nico's channel, just put Uncaged in there so that I know. And 50% of that is going straight to the nonprofit. Last time we made $5.50, and I thought, you know what, I just put $25 in there. And Dr. Pony actually was the one, his real name was the one that it was gifted under, because during the live broadcast, whoever donates the most money, it will be gifted in your name to the organization.
And I got an email, just right after that, from Kim Westfall, who is the founder of Uncaged, and she said, "Paul, this person has donated some money," and she was thrilled. Every dollar counts. So thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is really cool. This is an interactive thing. Paul's going to tell some stories. My dad, I can't call him Paul. That's weird.
It is weird.
My dad's going to tell some stories. We're going to talk. We're going to have interaction. If you have any questions, anything at all, put it in the chats. And if it flows well, if it's a good question, anything like that, I will try and get it in there. We'd love to hear from you. We love, the interaction is what this is mostly about, because most podcasts and vodcasts are pre-recorded and edited, which, is helpful a lot of times, but you get to see all the flaws, the hiccups, as you saw at the very beginning, all of that, because we want this interaction. It's a different situation than a lot of other ones. So that's that. And for anyone who's in here that wasn't here last time, Pony says, I made someone stay. Yes, sir. You absolutely did. You helping a good cause. It's awesome. For those of you who weren't here the first time he was here about a month ago, we tried to do it video gaming and talking, which I am still going to be doing at some point.
With people who can actually play.
Yes, with people who can actually play. Yeah. Called Streaming with Celebs.
Yeah.
And my dad doesn't really play video games. And trying to teach him to play video games while talking didn't work so well. So we came up with this idea, Stuff and Things, which was actually a podcast I originally intended to do. I just had not done it yet. But now, vodcast. Hey, fun times. He is the author of The Shack, and no, it's not about the basketball player. I know that's coming in the chats. Tony, I know you're going to say it, even though you know better. Crossroads, Eve, you might have seen the pictures come up before we started here. And Lies We Believe About God. And those are the main ones. He's also done some devotionals based off of his novels and stuff like that. But they deal a lot with faith and the Trinity and just kind of that. And yeah.
Loss and love.
Loss and love. There you go. I should let him talk about it. He kind of knows a little bit more since he wrote all this stuff and things. But we're going to... So that's kind of the intro. Would love those donations for uncaged.org. And we're going to get into this, into the meat, into the nitty gritty. What does the WM stand for? It stands for William.
It does. I'm one of 4 generations of Williams, none of them go by William. We all go by our middle names. So my dad is William Henry. Then our oldest is William Chad. I'm William Paul. And Chad's firstborn is William Gavin. So we all go by Henry, Paul, Chad, and Gavin. That's the WM.
So I had a question just off the get-go because I'm imagining most of the people that are in here.
Unrehearsed. I have no idea what he's going to ask me.
I didn't know I was going to ask him until 4 seconds ago. When did you know that your first book, The Shack, was going to be something incredible?
Let's see. Great question. So, for those of you who don't know, Nico's mom, Kim, whom I'm married to, she's the one that had said for about 4 years, someday as a gift for our children, would you just write something that puts in one place how you think, because you think outside the box. So that was the mandate. But I didn't feel healthy enough to do it until the year I turned 50. And here's what's funny. Eventually, when I got put into mass print, Nico's mom says, I was thinking 4 to 6 pages. Well, she didn't tell me that. And I've written all kinds of things, poetry and songs and short stories, but I'd never written a novel or a book. And I love story. Story has a way of sneaking past our watchful dragons. We get so locked in our heads, and story has a way of coming in through the heart. And so I wrote a story, and I centered it around a man who had horrible losses in his life, particularly the loss of a child. And I think the loss between a parent and a child is the greatest loss a human being can experience. The psychologists would agree. They say there's a depth to it that doesn't, even the loss between spouses who have loved each other for a lifetime, that's nothing compared to a loss between, well, it's something compared to it, but it doesn't equate to the loss between a parent and a child. And so I write this little story. I go down to Office Depot and make 15 copies with the photocopier. You put a little plastic cover to make it look cooler, and a little spiral thing on the binding. And Christmas comes, and I give 6 to the kids. Nico has 5 siblings. Kim, my wife, gets a copy, and the extras I just give to my friends. And then I went back to work. Not one time did it cross my mind to publish anything. It wasn't on my bucket list. It wasn't like one of those dreams out there. I don't know anything about publishing. So, but I thought, all right, cool. And it did everything I wanted it to do, those 15 copies. Took the kids a little while. It's like, oh, a book. Thanks, Dad. And but my friends read it. And then they started giving it to their friends. And we put a little collection together, my friends and I. And we made 15 more copies at Office Depot. And they went to friends. And pretty soon I started getting emails. So the first inclination I had was when my friends, people who didn't know me, wanted to write to me and tell me how this little story had landed in the middle of their own great sadnesses, losses of one sort or another. And, in hindsight, I'm so glad, because people would say, you used a frame of reference for a story for your children that involved a serial killer who abducts and murders a little girl. I mean, it's like for Christmas, and if you think about it that way, it is kind of odd. But what Kim had said is write something that puts in one place how you think. And so I wanted to deal with some of the issues that I think religion doesn't do a very good job at, especially the Christian faith that I come from. They don't know how to deal with loss very well. They don't know how to grieve very well, at least in the West. And I wanted to ask some hard questions, like, if tragedy happens, where's God? If God is good, then where is this God? And why didn't God stop that person? And this relates to me personally, because part of my own great sadness was sexual abuse, both in the culture that I grew up in and then in boarding school when I was sent away to boarding school. From peers, older boys. And so it's like, so where were you? Those kinds of questions, hard questions. In theology, they call it theodicy, questions about pain and suffering. And I was able to approach those things through a story. So when I started getting emails from my friends, people who did not know me, and they were opening up their lives, I knew something was going on. We eventually, that first manuscript landed in the hands of a couple guys in California, 3 of them, and they wanted to make it into a movie right off the bat. And that started a conversation about putting it into print. And here's what we were told. If you can write a novel and sell 100,000 copies, Hollywood will beat a path to your door. Well, I'm thinking, 100,000. I mean, there's more people than that in Portland. How hard can that be? How naive, right? The reason that Hollywood will beat a path to your door is because it's so rare. What I didn't know at the time was that the average book that is written in the United States and Canada sells between 3,000 and 5,000 copies its entire existence. So if it lasts for 20 years, it's sold between 3,000 and 5,000 copies. So if you can write a novel and you can sell 7,500, you can legitimately put bestseller on your novel. I had no idea that was true, and most people don't know that. They think you have to sell, cases and cases and cases, hundreds and thousands, but you don't. And but here's another thing: 56% of all writers, and that includes journalists, editors, authors, anybody to do with the writing profession, 56% of them cannot make a living wage from what they do. And, that shouldn't stop anybody. But if you're writing a novel with big dollar signs in your eyes, you're not being very realistic. You have to write for other reasons than money. You write because you can't stop yourself from writing, or it's just part of how you think, or you want to give it as a gift like I did to those that I love.
Or it helps you process things, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of my writing comes from helping me process the things that are going through my brain. I get a lot of, just tons of thoughts that permeate my brain, don't let me sleep, stuff like that. And so writing can help me with that.
Writing's an activity, not an aspiration.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's work, but I love that kind of work. So I've always written, just didn't know anybody outside of my friends and family would care. Your friends and family, they love everything you do. So it's a creative stuff, at least. And so I knew something was up, but I mean, 30 copies out there, and it was causing a little ripple. So eventually, the guys in California and we worked on getting the book ready to give to actual publishers. 26 of them. Half of them were faith-based publishers, and half of them were secular mainstream press. And I sort of hoped that the secular folks would pick it up, but I didn't have to worry. Nobody wanted it. All 26 turned it down, and I asked this, to me, seemed like an obvious question. How hard is it to publish a book? Because I had no clue. And so 2 of the 3 guys in California that wanted to turn it into a movie created a publishing house. I don't know whether it cost them $500 or $200 or whatever it cost them in California. They then had a publishing house, and I had a publisher. But they had done it not just for my book, but they had their own projects that they wanted to do and just be a place that people could publish. And so now I had a publisher, and we found a local printer near one of the guys' houses. He volunteered to ship books out of his house at night because he's putting in people's sprinkler systems during the day. And I'm working up here in Portland, working 3 jobs. And our goal was, here was our goal. We wanted to get through 10,000 copies in the first 2 years, and then work our way up to 100,000 in 5 years, and then Hollywood will come talk to the guys about a movie. That was the goal. And so we pooled resources. I had a buddy in Gresham, Oregon, who loaned me some money, and a plug for Jan Weston at GMC.
Hey.
Yep. And but he was my friend, and he loaned me my third of the first print run, and we ordered 10,000 copies. And people who know the industry, and I've told that to, they go like, 10,000 copies? I'm going like, hey, we got a really big price break at 10,000. You know, lots of zeros. And they're like, 10,000 is usually means 8,000 in your garage after you've run out of friends and family. And so we got 11,000 because they accidentally printed an extra 10% and charged us for them. There's actually a technical term in publishing for that. It's called overage, and you have to pay for it. So we now had 11,000 copies, and we had no marketing, no promotion. Nobody knew we existed. So we set up a website, and an unbelievably wonderful, surprising thing started to happen. People would come to the website, and they would buy one. Then 2 weeks later, they would come back, and they would buy 5. And then 2 weeks after that, they would come back, and they would buy cases. Did not see that coming. We gave a whole bunch away, too. And people we knew or contacts. And we also, since we were the publishers, I wasn't, but the 2 guys, and we had a very limited budget, we decided, forget the hardback stuff. You know, we're going to go straight to paperback, which turned out to be quite brilliant, actually, and made it far more accessible for people. They could buy it in bulk. There were no rules for us because we didn't know what we were doing anyway. And so we went through, instead of taking 2 years to get through our 11,000 copies, it took 3.5 months. And then so we ordered 20,000 and they delivered 22,000 overage. And we went through 22,000 in 60 days. And then we went through 33,000 in 30 days. And at that point, we knew something was going on because all those publishers that had turned us down, they started calling us. Because the booksellers were trying to find out who was the publisher of this because they couldn't track the bookseller even. So places like Barnes and Noble, you know, people were going to go in they're going to go in to buy the shack, and they would look them up, you know, and they'd say, I'm sorry, there's no such book. And they go like, well, here's the publisher. And they look up the publisher and they go like, doesn't exist. And it became this a little bit of a game for the retailers and everybody else to try to backtrack to find out who were these people. And so and Nico was down at one point there starting to work, and he worked down there for about a year.
I worked out of a garage, shipping books, and
2 storage units.
Yeah, 2 storage units. I was in a garage most of my time, in a house, and there were times where I was shipping 1,000 books a day.
Yeah.
And all sorts of crazy stuff like that. It was It was wild.
So by Christmas, we hit number one on Amazon. Number one on Amazon of all books. And people like Barnes and Nobles would call us up and they'd say, "Hey, we're really excited about your little book. Could you send us your marketing and promotion plan so that we can get on board?" And the response from California was, "Do you have one you could send us that we could cut and paste?" Right? Like, we don't know about marketing plans and how these all things work. So then they called us back and they said, "We charge a lot of money to put a publisher's books at the front of our stores nationwide. Would you allow us?" It's called placement. "Would you allow us to do that for you for 3 months for free?" Well, yeah, that would be just really super duper. So they did, and the book took off. So in the first 13 months, out of a garage in Los Angeles, 2 storage units and a local printer, we spent less. We think it was $242 for an internet ad that never ran. But that was our marketing and promotion. We spent less than $300 in marketing and promotion and shipped almost 1.1 million copies of The Shack.
No marketing at all.
No.
Really. I mean, like, in the world of marketing for books, it was like...
So Barnes and Noble started putting the books at the front of the stores. People would walk in, they'd see these big, huge pyramids of The Shack. And it was getting really great press from everybody until, some of the religious people from my own tradition actually read it. And then there was a little bit of a backlash because the characters don't quite fit modern evangelical fundamentalism. And so it turns out that the book's not a religious book, it never was intended to be a religious book. It's a book about relationships. It's a book about being human. And I think part of being human is all the questions involved with God and origin
and the backlash that you got.
And the backlash that I got. Yeah, it was fun.
It's part of being human.
I know, it is.
The uncomfortableness
of
situations.
And for me, it wasn't uncomfortable because 15 copies had already done everything I wanted this book to do. So this was all like riding the wave and just like, all right, I don't understand this at all, but this is pretty amazing. And then plus, I'm getting 25, 50, 100 emails a day from people all over the world, and they're not your typical email. They are, "Let me tell you how your book landed in the middle of my family's great sadness," or "We had this loss and this is what changed," or "This has completely changed my view of who God is and who I am as a human being." So these were deep and beautiful and wrenching communications from people. So at the end of those 13 months, the 2 guys who own the publishing house in California entered a joint venture with Hachette, the second largest publisher in the world. And then they took The Shack internationally and it just took off. So it's done better around the world than it has domestically. And it's done really well domestically. And it has been quite the ride. Before Hachette came on the scene, The Shack hit number 1, and it didn't hit number 1. It just showed up as number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list, and it stayed number 1 for 49 weeks in a row. And so at what point did I figure it out? I think it was in the fall of 2007 when suddenly the publishers were coming back and they were talking about, they had a term called a wildfire. And a wildfire in publishing is something just comes out of nowhere, grabs the attention of the reading audience, and begins to cut such a large swath through the world that it begins to attract non-readers. And they get enfolded in and they become readers. So the sense of wildfire is that nobody's in control of this. And we're going like, hey, God's sense of humor, and because it was a God thing right from the very beginning. So wild and crazy story, I know, but that's sort of how it unfolded. Pretty cool, really cool, actually.
Yeah, and it's I had something in my brain and then it disappeared. To answer the question, Pony had asked, "What is your preferred way for us to buy the book?" aka what way gets you the most cash. I said Amazon.
Amazon.
Amazon's great.
Yeah, it is, and thank you for asking it that way. That's very kind. But it's everywhere, and internationally, it's in 50 languages. It's the number 2 book in the history of Brazil, number 1 by a non-Brazilian. It's Croatia dubbed it their book of the decade, and the Ministry of Culture in Croatia contacted me 3 years ago now, and invited me to come speak to the country, which was amazing.
And isn't it right now? It's in a competition for NPR.
Yes, it's on. Thank you for bringing that up.
I will try to find it while he's talking.
Yeah, NPR has this program called The Great American Read, and you can vote for whatever book, and it doesn't have to be an American book, but they're just trying to talk about the reading audience in the United States, and so you can vote, and they've been doing shows on NPR and actually National Public Television. So then on October 21st, they're going to do a live show where they unveil the number 1 read that has been voted on. So you can vote once a day on the website for the Great American Read, and they've got about 100 books now in the top 100, of which The Shack is one of them. And you vote for it, and on the 21st of October, I get to be live in New York City as one of the presenters. We don't know what we're presenting yet because we don't know who's doing, how the voting will turn out. But you can vote right up until midnight the night before. And I think the midnight on October 19th, I think that's how it works. But Nickel will find the link. But I'm sure there's a lot of readers out there.
Yeah, I found the link. I posted it in the chat. Perfect. Right down there. Just go there. You can vote. And if you haven't read the book and you don't know if you like it or not, you just vote for another book. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm still waiting to find out what my dress code is. I said flannel shirt and jeans. I got a feeling that's not going to fly. They just laughed. But we don't know what the deal on that is yet. So that's pretty cool. I get to fly out there. They fly me out there.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that just happened within the last couple days. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I did.
And so you've gotten to travel all over the world. He got to go to the Shire.
I did. I went to Hobbiton in New Zealand and got a whole bunch of inside scoop. The Green Dragon is still there as a working pub, and right on the property. But you can they give this tour, and there's the bench that Gandalf and Bilbo sat in, and there's the bench right in front of Bilbo Baggins' place, and then there's the fence that they jumped, that he jumped, and but it's all there. The big tree. I'll tell you, there's this cool tree, not the party tree, which is there, and it's real, and it's massive. But when you see a shot of the Shire, there was this big tree up on the hill behind Bilbo Baggins' place, and they were telling us how we had kind of some wind during the day we were there, and nothing on the tree was moving. All the other trees were moving around and blowing, but this tree was absolutely still. It's because it's all made out of metal. And there was a tree. They'd brought in a tree and they'd planted it and it died. So Jackson said, Jackson, right? Peter Jackson, yes. So Peter Jackson says he wants that tree. So they built it out of metal, and they hand painted every single leaf on the whole thing. And then he didn't like the shade of greens that they used, so they had to hand paint every leaf on that. And it's only in a couple little shots, But they also told us that they had a 70-mile that the legislature in New Zealand passed a bill that they had a no-fly zone anywhere over where they were shooting. And the sentence was, if you got caught flying someone into the no-fly zone as the pilot, you lost your license for the rest of your life. two guys got nailed. So they started flying over because they'd be hired for a lot of money by the press, and they'd start to enter that space, and an F-15 or some fighter jet would show up on their tail and escort them until they landed, and then they would arrest the pilot, and he'd lose his license for the rest of his life. So you hope the payday was sufficient for that kind of risk. But yeah,
that's it.
Right the deal.
The power that some people can wield to get things done.
Yeah, and over a number of years.
Yeah. That's
but do you remember seeing, prior to the movies, any aerial footage over any of that stuff? No.
Yeah. Wow.
It's kind of cool. You're flying in a commercial jet, flying between Auckland and down to Christchurch, and you fly by Doom, the Mount Doom, and it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So have you been to 6 out of the 7 continents now?
I haven't been to the Antarctic.
Yeah. No penguins are interested in the
but I've been to all the other ones. Yeah.
All right. That's fantastic.
It's pretty fun, actually.
So in any of your journeys, has anything crazy happened? Just kind of blew your mind, or was so unexpected and stuck in your head?
Yeah. I've got a lot of those stories. Crazy things. I meet amazing human beings. I really do. It's one of the, I've told people that those 15 copies did everything I wanted the book to do, and that's true. And the book didn't give me identity or worth or value or significance, meaning, destiny, all those kinds of things were settled for me before I wrote the book, thankfully. Because a lot of people who don't know who they are, something like this happens to them, and it just messes with them. And so, those kinds of questions were already resolved. So the book didn't give me identity, worth, value, significance, security, meaning, purpose, destiny, community, or love. But what it did give me is an invitation to walk on the holy ground of other people's stories. Every human being is a story. And I laugh. I always say, I think that's why eternity will take so long, is because we're going to listen to each other's stories, and we're going to take the thread that connected us, and we're going to find out where it went, who was connected to that thread, and we're going to wind these threads all through humanity to find out who's connected to what and where the storylines run. So I get to hear lots of incredible stories, amazing, wrenching, a lot of times loss and love, the two things that all human beings have in common. Beyond politics, beyond religion, we have loss and love, and I get to hear those stories. There was a couple that I was in the Midwest somewhere in the U.S. and this couple comes up. And when I sign books, because I didn't know about signing books, it seemed a little pretentious to me, and it's like, how do you redeem book signing? So I hug everybody. You want a book sign? I'm going to give you a hug. I mean, it's just like, and I'm gonna think about what I'm going to write in the book for you as well. So some of my book signings last a long time, maybe 3 to 4 hours long, but I don't sit behind a table, because you can't hug anybody from behind a table. So the table's behind me, and this couple comes up, and they start laying photos down on the table. And they start telling me their story. A year before I met them at that table, their 21-year-old only child, daughter, was killed by a drunk driver. And it devastated them. I mean, it dropped the mom into such a dark place that she couldn't get out. And over the course of the months that followed, every time she tried to find her feet, something would trigger her back, and she'd spiral back into this abyss of depression. And I mean, their relationship was tense, because a lot of times when you lose a child, the parents, they lose each other And it's a really sad thing, but it happens oftentimes. And then, and the husband was dealing with his own stuff. And about 8 months into that spiraling depression cycle, he, out of desperation, said to his wife, look, why don't we get out of town for a couple of weeks? We've got 2 states next to us that we've never explored. We've never even been in. And so why don't we just pack stuff up for 2 weeks, and we'll just go find a bed and breakfast at one little town after another. We'll explore, we'll do something, change our scenery, get out of here. And surprisingly, she agreed. So about 10 days into this trip, they're 2 states away from home, areas that they have no clue, they've never been in, of course. And they'd stayed at a bed and breakfast in this little town. And they got up in the morning and they decided that they'd go find a park and have a picnic. So they'd gotten the stuff at the local grocery store and a little, plastic tablecloth and the whole thing. And then they went looking for a park. And you'd think that there would be a park in every little town in the country. And they started exploring through this town, but they couldn't find a park. All they wanted was a picnic table so that they could have their lunch. And about 2 hours later, they're starting to do concentric circles outside of town because there's no park in this town. And they're about to give up and go back to town, back to the bed and breakfast, and just eat their lunch there. And the wife says, well, let's just try this road here. It's a paved road. And they go back about 5 or 6 miles, and now, there's no houses set near the roads. There's farmland, big fields, there's fence lines, there's trees, and it's beautiful. And then she says, well, let's try that road right there. It's a dirt road. Now they're on a dirt road. Who knows where? Nobody knows where they are. And they go about a mile, and suddenly she goes, look! And they have a photo of this, right? They've got photos of all of this whole story. And you look at the photo, and they shot it from the car on the road, and it was of a field. And it looks like they're in the middle of this mowed field. Right in the middle is a picnic table just sitting there all by itself. No buildings around, nothing. 50 yards beyond it, there's some kind of a little outbuilding, very small, along a fence line and trees. And they're like, okay. So they go out there. They take their picnic stuff. I mean, nobody's around. It's like, who's going to care anyway? So they take their little picnic basket and they take it out there. And it turns out that it's not a picnic table, but it looks like it from the road. What it is the other side, it has steps going up to the stoop, it used to be a house, some settler's house or who knows what, farmhouse that had burned down, been torn away, no evidence left except this stone and concrete set of stairs going up to a flat surface. Well, it's not a picnic table, but hey, at that point, who cares? So they lay their picnic out. They put the tablecloth down and everything, and they start to eat. And at one point, about halfway through the meal, the wife looks over at this little outbuilding that's about 50 yards away, and she goes, there's a little white sign above the door, but I can't make out what it says. Can you make out what it says? And her husband looks over and squints, and he goes like, oh no, can't make out what it says. I'll go over and look. So he walks over there, comes back. He's got a picture of it. It's a little oval that sits above the door, white sign, and it says The Shack, which means nothing to them. And they hadn't heard of the book at this point or anything. And so it's The Shack. Oh, okay, The Shack. So then they finish their meal and they're heading back to the car when suddenly the wife says, I'm going to go in there. And the husband goes like, in where? He says, the shack. I'm going to go in the shack. He says, I don't know if that's a good idea or not because, don't want to wake somebody up. And she says, no, you can go to the car. I'm going to the shack. So she heads over there and he follows her over. And she just walks right in. And it's a really small little one-room shed, but it's kind of immaculate. And there's something on every wall, every corner. And they have photos of everything. And on the main wall, there is a desk. It takes up almost the whole wall. One desk, a chair. There's a post. There's some notice of some sort on the desk. Then there's a sign-up sheet. And then there's 2 copies of a book they'd never seen. The notice says, please take whatever you need. And you look, and they have photos of all this, and you look at the sign-up sheet, and these are people from all over the country who've been there and signed up. And the book, I'm in a signing line, and this woman holds up a tattered copy of The Shack, my book, and she's bawling, and she says, your book saved my life. And I'm thinking, like, somebody had read the book and got touched in such a way that they set up this little tiny place in the middle of nowhere, and whoever happened to come by, they were giving copies of The Shack away. And this couple, in the midst of their lost darkness, had traveled 2 states to find it. To me, that reflects the goodness of a God who's involved in the details of our lives, no matter how dark they are to us. And I mean, I write fiction, and you can't even make that kind of stuff up. It was just so beautiful. So that's a story.
That's one of thousands.
Yeah,
that are true. Like that.
That's really true.
Yeah, I did some email sifting through with the thousands and thousands of emails that you got, and just some of the stories even in the emails were absolutely incredible. Now, so as an author, I'm sure you like to read other books.
I do.
Is there anything that you are reading right now that you think is a phenomenal read that people would absolutely enjoy?
I'm reading a manuscript that's just going to come out as a book, and it's a fairly simple story, but it's called Where the Colors Blend by Stephen Copeland, and I don't even know if it's out yet. I get to read a bunch of books because people, if I read them and like them, then I can put a little blurb. And even though I was shipping out soldering tips and cleaning toilets, that was some of my jobs, you know. So now I have enough notoriety that it's important to people. And I actually love to do that if I like the book. So that's one that I just read. I read a book, A New Gospel for Women, that is a story of one of my heroes, Catherine Bushnell. And
I've put the link in the chat.
What's her first name? She has a PhD. She wrote the book about Catherine Bushnell. And Catherine Demez. And I think she might have a second name in there. But she wrote a book on Catherine Bushnell. Kristen, there you go. That's the one.
Kristen Dumez.
Yep. And the book is called?
It is called A New Gospel for Women.
That's what I thought.
Catherine Bushnell and the Challenge of Christian Feminism.
Yeah. So Catherine Bushnell lived in the 1800s and barely into the 1900s, I believe. But she was a Hebrew-Greek scholar. She did some work on gender issues and the issue of women. But she also went into military camps in India and just exposed trafficking and horrible sexual exploitation that was happening in the 1800s, and was one of those voices that really was a pioneer. So that was good. I have here's a great book and that I just read recently by John McMurray, and it's called Spiritual Evolution, and it's a book written by a man who became a Bible scholar and teacher, who is now having to unwind many of the things that he used to taught, because he realizes that a lot of what he had taught he now no longer believes. And so it's pretty fascinating. It's got two of the best chapters on justice that I've ever read. Book by Brian Zahnd, Zahnd, called Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God. A book by Richard Rohr, Catholic priest, a Franciscan who has had a huge impact in the world, called Falling Upward. Baxter Kruger, The Great Dance, which is about Trinitarian theology, but he's a storyteller from Mississippi. Very beautiful. Brad Jersak, out of British Columbia, has written a couple books, A More Christ-Like God being one of them. That's sort of where I've been buried for the last little while. I'm trying to think of the last fiction that I read that I really liked, but escapes me at the moment. And but there's some really good writers out there. There's a lot of books that are really beautiful.
So you travel a lot.
I do.
And you're busy a lot.
Trying not to.
And
with 12 grandbabies, are you kidding?
And so what do you do in your off time? How do you unwind? How do you relax?
12 grandbabies.
12 grandbabies.
Yeah,
I have 3
years,
of them.
Yes, you do. All 11 years old and under, and 9 of them are within 15 minutes of our house.
Yep.
So, and I'm married to like the quintessential mom and grandma. I mean, it's just natural to her. And so she's the gravitational field when it comes to grandchildren. Other things that I do, people have asked me a lot about what my hobbies are, and I love to read and I love to go to a movie, and but in terms of hobbies, I'll tell you what I really like. I like climbing into the passions of my friends. So, for example, I like golfing, but I would never go golfing by myself. But when my friends say, "Hey, Paul, you want to come golfing?" I'm like all over it. Same with fishing or anything. If they want to dig around in their backyard and that's their passion, and they get to talk about the things that matter to them, I'm like, yeah, count me in. They want to go hear a lecture on something, especially if it's scientific. I love quantum theory and astrophysics, and I think that's fascinating stuff. So I'm kind of eclectic that way. I don't have really, you can't go to my house and find all the, like all my woodworking tools stuff, But I like making stuff, but I would just never do it. I just don't have the stuff or the inclination. But if you got it and you want to invite me over, I'm all over it.
Fantastic. Let's see here.
Anybody have any questions?
I'm asking if anybody has any questions. This is an interactive thing, guys. This is interactive. It's not cutting edge, but it's fun. So I'll just keep asking questions then.
Until somebody else does.
Yeah, exactly. We've got about 5-ish minutes left.
Wow.
In this episode. Yeah, we've already gone almost an hour.
See what happens when you tell stories?
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of movies, anything you've seen lately that you really, really liked that hit you, even if it was just pure entertainment?
I liked, what was the big Marvel one that we just had where everybody got killed?
Spoilers.
They didn't all get killed, but...
Spoilers.
Yeah. What was that?
Infinity War.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I like movies. So I've got, if I started thinking about it, I'd start going through movies that I love. I love pretty much anything Monty Python ever did, and especially Life of Brian. I thought, if you're going to make a sarcastic or a ironic slam against religious systems, I mean, that's got to be right up there.
Yeah, and one of the funny things about that movie in particular is all of the different religions were up in arms about it, just like, this is blasphemy, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. But if you actually watch the movie and you see the Jesus character in the movie, he is the Jesus character from the Bible. He's the only Jesus one that is the straight character in the whole movie.
I know. So, it was brilliant. So Jesus becomes the straight through line of the movie. and everybody else is off in their own stuff and is confused, and there are some of the funniest scenes that I've ever seen are in Life of Brian. And
Blessed are the cheesemakers.
yeah, which is great. So the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew chapter 5, and so you got all these people that are standing around trying to hear Jesus, and he's way over there on the hill, and he's you can hear it enough that you know that they're playing him straight, like he's almost like reading out of Matthew 5. So he's speaking these things, and the people are trying. What did he say? He says, "Blessed are the cheesemakers." Well, what's so special about cheesemakers? And this really erudite, scholarly-looking gentleman who's all about himself turns around and begins to explain why cheesemakers are so important to the culture and why Jesus would be saying such a thing. I mean, it's just hilarious.
It's great.
One of my favorite scenes in that movie is where Brian, who was born just down the street from Jesus, and the wise men show up at the wrong house at first, which is pretty funny. But he grows up and he's all confused about everything, pretty much everything, and so he's joining this political organization or that, and the Romans are chasing him, and he falls through a window and ends up in the street preachers section of Jerusalem, and there's your 60s spaced out druggy street preacher who's basically saying nothing but
very eloquent.
and then there's the John the Baptist kind of ripping the world apart, and so he's trying to hide from the Romans, and he knocked this street preacher out of his stand, and he's in the stand, and people are going like, so? Well, and he's trying to remember what he heard Jesus say. And so he's like, and the secret of eternal life is, and he's looking for the Romans, is, and somebody goes, well, what is it? He says, well, what's what? What's the secret of eternal life? He goes, and they go, hey, this guy knows the secret of eternal life. And a crowd starts to form, and now he's sort of caught. So he decides to jump down and run, and people start following him, chasing him, and he loses one of his sandals, and people go like, oh, yeah, I have his sandal. And so, and he had bought this, not an urn, but something to hold, gourd, and he laid it down because he's trying to run, and somebody goes, I have his gourd, and a whole group splits into two. You have the people of the sandal and the people of the gourd who are following the guy who believes that he knows the key to eternal life, and I'm going like, these are so my people.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie.
It's
so many things in there.
Anyway, that's just one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, another really good one that you can't hardly find, I don't even know if you can find that on DVD, is Man Friday with Richard Roundtree and Peter O'Toole. Story of Robinson Crusoe and Friday. Robinson Crusoe is a Calvinist. It opens with him reading Genesis 1, about man is given dominion over the earth. Oh, I like that, and then Friday is from this tribe of no rules and gets washed up on shore, and so they spend the rest of the movie trying to change each other, which is, and it's pretty intense and beautiful and wrenching, and that's really well done. Probably got nowhere in box office, but it's,
Yeah,
I like a good murder mystery. I like some of the Marvel stuff. There's a lot of movies I like. Good dramas.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, that's about our time. I want to thank Mr. William Paul Young, my dad, father.
Honored to be on number one.
That's right. Get the kinks worked out with the people that love you. So, I want to thank you guys for coming in and joining us tonight and having some fun. And, I'm going to try to get more people in here to come and talk to everybody about anything and everything. Stuff and things, as it were.
Well, thank you, Nico.
Yeah.
I love you with all my heart.
I love you too, and I'm very, very glad that you were here to help.
I'm going to go watch a high school football game.
Yes, high school football.
Some of our grandnephews.
Yes, the grandnephews. I will be on streaming normal in an hour, 8 o'clock. Just doing my normal stream thing. But next Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, whether I have a guest or not, I'm going to be doing this because consistency matters. And
Thanks for coming by.
I want to keep it consistent. And if anybody out there has anything that they want to talk about or, would like me to discuss, anything like that, just let me know. And we'll see what we can do. Otherwise, I have to come up with topics. But Harps, I had a thing where I asked if I could get some people, but no one came in. Oh, that's all right. We'll get everybody. Here's the thing. Everybody who's supposed to be at something is at that thing. For me personally, I would love a lot more people to be in here interacting, stuff like that. But maybe this one isn't for them. Maybe 5 episodes down the road is the one that they need to be and to listen to and interact and however it makes them feel or live. So you know what? Every single person that's in here right now, I am very grateful for. And I hope that you got a little something out of this. And I'm thrilled. I love doing this. This is me. Talking to people, interacting, hoping that I can lift somebody's day up, have some fun, and enjoy it. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Stuff and Things episode 1 is in the can. Hey, that's right. Father-son connection there. Right. So I'll be back on in an hour with those television screens and such. But until then, have a great night, have a great weekend, and I will see you in the future.